So one of the greatest gifts of getting older that I have experienced is the security and understanding that I don't know everything and that there's no reason that I should, right? Like I have my own particular areas of knowledge and expertise. And so the idea that I would need to know everything is one that I've like really let go of. At the same time though, we live in a highly complex world and society where we're having to make very multiple decisions in terms of politics and morality and blah, 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 etc. And so one of the things that I've noticed with people who, in my estimation, in my opinion, are incorrectly taking in information and making conclusions is that they latch onto one person that they, for whatever reason, trust. Or maybe there's like a compelling narrative that's, integrated in the sense of itself that they trust. And then they believe whatever that person's been telling them. And it could be because of my background, kind of like high school and also my career, where my modality is very much like, sure, okay, you make those claims, but like, where's your proof? But the interesting thing is there are a lot of times where you're not going to be able to analyze whether or not someone's proof is legitimate or says what they say it says. And how do you kind of figure out like what to do with that? So in the legal field, if you have someone making claims that purports to be an expert, generally speaking, they are going to be coming with a pedigree of like a degree and a certain kind of like, in addition to their education, their employment history and their career and their standing amongst their peers. And so you'll have attorneys bring people in to make educated assessments in areas that maybe, like, let's say an attorney isn't familiar with, from a person who, from all intents and purposes, appears to be an expert in their field. So you have like an expert witness. And if you're a person who's trying to determine like whether or not that person is legitimate, you're looking at a whole bunch of secondary pieces to kind of put that together. So obviously, the majority of us in our day-to-day life are not going to sit there and, it's exhausting to cross-check claims and references. I've done it. I've dated several guys who kind of got sucked into, I want to say, Ancient Aliens and like some guy named Bob Lazar and just sort of like Dan Aykroyd and like Crystal Skulls. And, I didn't want to shut down those claims because, I don't technically know. I'm not there. I don't necessarily know. So how do you determine whether something is true or false in an area that you don't necessarily have direct knowledge about, or maybe don't even have like the correct education for? One thing that I've noticed in kind of like recent political times, particularly with COVID, people are making claims about statistics, and I took AP classes. I took AP economics. I saw most people didn't understand statistics, and I know myself well enough to go, oh, no. Like, I am not a person who can credibly run a statistical analysis and then put that forward and say, I've determined certain things to be accurate. Like, that's not a thing that I can do, nor should I. So if you kind of go, oh no, this is not my area of expertise, first you gotta make sure you don't fall into a trap of like you want to believe. No offense to Fox Mulder, but that's a trap. If you want to believe, you're more likely to latch onto things that are not credible or believe a lie because you want to believe it's true. So you have to make sure about that. And number two, your best option is going to be to find the experts in that field and then see what their discussion is about it. So sometimes people, when it comes to, for example, climate change, they want to ignore, like, I want to say it's like 98% of experts that are kind of in agreement that climate change is occurring, that it's human driven, blah, 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 whatever. But for whatever reasons, they've decided that this is not valid or credible. At the same time, though, it's worth go to where those experts are, see what their discussion looks like, what points are they making. Don't just find one person that's telling you what you want to hear. You want to see what the discussion looks like about experts in their field. I typically do this in terms of economics. I've learned a lot. I've learned that I do not know enough about economics to put forth like an educated opinion. I've seen what economics, experts in economics say, and it is, I've definitely gone through and read like those analyses and those cross arguments, and it's definitely more than, oh, I know what a Laffer curve is, right? But when you see experts in that field and they're having that conversation, they're making those judgments and assessments, it gives you an idea of like where your blind spots are, what areas of information that you don't have. They're obviously making judgment calls based on information that that they have, or education that they have, or experience that they have. And so it really does help like adjust our perspective, so that if we are wanting a certain thing to be true, or having like an ideological, we're married ideologically to a certain opinion, that gives us like a very big blind spot. One person I actually find to be very interesting, and I do love the way that he thinks, is Jordan Peterson. He gets like a lot of flack, and I think he has some absolutely compelling things to say. He does, in my opinion, have some blind spots. But I think what happens is that people, they find a person, they think, oh, I agree with, what this guy says about stuff that I know about. And so therefore, the stuff that he said, that he's talking about that maybe I don't know about, he can educate me on, and I'll take what he says at face value. And the thing is, that's like absolutely a trap. Nobody should do that, including gentlemen that I have dated. And so the best thing to do is to, you want to get in on what are a group of people in this field saying. If you pay attention to what like a group of lawyers say about, for example, Supreme Court nominee hearings versus what like lay people are saying, it's a completely different conversation. And so, I'm not saying this to necessarily influence anybody one way or the other, but if you're trying to figure out in an area that you don't have base knowledge for, if you're trying to figure out like, how do I have an informed opinion, or at least understand what the issues at play are, the thing that you're going to want to do is you go find experts in that field, and you see what they have to say and what their information is back and forth. Unfortunately for me, on Reddit, the lawyer subreddit is private, which completely makes sense. I know that whenever I give advice, I very strongly direct people to counseling and therapy. Like, I'm not a professional. I'm not trying to give you a professional opinion. That would be a horrible idea. I'm just some person on the internet without a credential. Go find you a therapist. Go find you a psychologist. I know things from what I've read, and I can reference those sources. But at the same time, we have to be really careful about what information we let in, because then suddenly you are 100% full on ancient aliens with zero critical thinking skills. Oh, bless these people. So anyway, it's important to understand that if there's a person that we trust and they're giving us information, that we don't just necessarily go, okay, yeah, I trust them. I'm gonna like agree with their perspective, opinion, worldview, whatever. You really want something broader. You want to know what the overarching discussions and themes are. And the only way you're really going to get that from an informed perspective is to find out where the experts in that field are and figure out where they're talking about it. So anyway, hope that makes sense. We're living in crazy times. I've personally been doing some analysis of like kind of right-wing sources, the shift of Fox News versus like Newsmax and Rumble, you know, and kind of seeing where people are, particularly if they're emotionally or ideologically vested in the idea that the elections are stolen elections, kind of, you know, where their shifts are and how they're moving, you know, in terms of their media intake and their social media, etc. And one thing that I will say is that to a person, they are hierarchically ranking their credible sources. So for example, Donald Trump is at the top, you know, and he is typically parroting like QAnon conspiracy theories, whether or not he realizes it. And then depending on where people are at, like right now Tucker Carlson is running into some issues, is whether or not people are continuing to follow those pundits. So, you know, my sense is that at some point we're going to have something that's big enough, incontrovertible enough, that everybody is going to have to, we're going to be forced to come together to have a shared sense of reality. But it's not happening yet, so we're dealing with that. So we're having to, in a sophisticated sense, sort through information and resources. Just know that don't depend on one person, don't even depend on one media source. Your best bet is going to be find where the experts are, see what their discussion is like, and that'll give you a better sense of kind of what's going on. Anyway, hope that makes sense, and then talk to you next time.